Call to order. A quorum is present. The Committee on State and Local Government will come to order. Today is Tuesday, February 11th at 12:30 p.m. The first item on the agenda is Senate File 586 with Senator Gustafson and co-presenter Senator Kroon. Thank you all for being here today. I know it's a very important and much followed discussion this session. Thank you all for your thoughts and attention to this critical issue. Government accountability and responsible stewardship of public funds is a priority to all of us. The willingness to talk about government responsibility and the fraud and waste committed against it is a strength of our democracy, not a weakness. The collective partnership of both sides to address this issue is good governance. Before we begin, I wanted to make a couple of observations that I hope will help guide our work and to help us stay the course for an honest and productive discussion. First, I have been seeing numerous statements that allege that we or Governor Walz have never addressed the issue of accountability prior to this session. As members know, we acted in 2023 and 2024 to strengthen protections across numerous areas of the budget. Grants to nonprofits, licensing to care centers, state dollars for nursing homes, transparency at the Met Council, workforce incentives, and internal controls at the Department of Education, to name a few. We should begin our work with the recognition that we all care about preventing theft and abuse. We have made progress on this front, and we can continue to make more, especially if we start with the same set of facts and approach the issue in good faith. Second, one of the key phrases we hear this session is waste, fraud, and abuse. And we are also hearing that in Washington, D.C., where the new administration are freezing funds and destroying agencies, alleging waste, fraud, and abuse without evidence. Let's have a productive conversation. I want us to be mindful of how we talk about this topic as relates to also to public employees. Too often the discussion of high-profile fraud cases has attempted to connect them directly to the governor, as if members of the administration were somehow involved. Let's be clear, public employees have not been accused of corruption or aiding in the commission of a crime. This is not fraud by state agencies. It is fraud committed against them and against the people in need of services, people the state committed to help, and whose program is instead being exploited by criminals. We need to know what laws and resources those agencies have in place to prevent, pause, and catch these cases, and what would help them in this effort. As we will hear in one bill, about whistleblower protections for workers, public employees are often the first line of defense when it comes to detecting the misuse or theft of public dollars. I will not accept attempts to impugn their motives in this committee. We should consider state and local government, from commissioners to mayors to frontline desk workers, not as opposition, but as our partners. Members of all four caucuses have brought forth their ideas to address these issues, and so has the governor. It is our obligation to constituents to find real solutions by passing laws and providing resources that will continue to strengthen our oversight, transparency, and accountability. We can do this work together and achieve a bipartisan accomplishment, but only if we choose to do so. And today I'm glad we have both Senator Gustafson and Senator Kroon working very hard together to bring forward this bill. And Senator Gustafson, I hand the mic off to you and present your bill.
Thank you, Chair Zhang. Minnesotans work hard for their money. They deserve a government that is equally diligent in protecting it. In recent legislative sessions, we've taken significant steps to safeguard our state's budget from waste and fraud by implementing new protections and transparency measures for grants, establishing accountability task forces, and introducing audit provisions. Building upon these efforts, today we'll be hearing legislation to establish an independent Office of Inspector General for the state of Minnesota. It's a practical solution to ensure accountability, transparency, and fiscal responsibility in state government. As a first-term senator, having a new perspective on the legislative process has motivated me to ask what more we can do to hold bad actors accountable and prevent misuse of taxpayer dollars before it can happen. An Office of Inspector General is more than catching fraud after it happens. It's about building on a culture of accountability and proactive oversight. Minnesotans expect their government to prioritize efficient and ethical use of their hard-earned tax dollars. This bill would deliver that. Our state has seen a concerning amount of fraud cases in the past few years. Addressing this is a priority for both Democrats and Republicans. At the table today, you'll see something that we don't often see. This bill is being co-presented by a Democrat and a Republican. I want to highlight the work that our co-authors have put into this bill. A special thank you to Senator Draheim, Senator Latz, Senator Putnam, and Senator Cruen, who joins me here today. These are not just co-authors. They are active partners in the drafting of this bill language, proof that Minnesotans can work together to get done important things that need to get done. Both parties want a solution that is practical and directly addresses the concerns that Minnesotans have expressed. We believe that solution is to create an Office of Inspector General, a true independent oversight authority who will hold any public or private entity responsible for the tax dollars they receive. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Gustafson. Senator Cruen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. And Mr. Chair, I'm not here today to impugn anybody's motives. I'm here to solve a problem. And as U.S. Attorney Andrew Lugar recently said, Minnesota has a fraud problem. And establishing a state office of Inspector General is a key component to combat waste, fraud, and abuse here in Minnesota. Inspector General is embedded within state agencies that are hired by and report to commissioners is insufficient to combat waste, fraud, and abuse. In my view, having Inspector Generals report to the head of the agency charged with administering the programs that are subject to attempts to defraud is structurally ineffective and destined to limit effectiveness. We need to empower agency employees who see red flags of fraud to be able to freely report that information without any fear of negative consequences on their employment. The goal of this bill, as I see it, is to create an Office of Inspector General that is as independent as possible. There are some legal and constitutional considerations that we as authors took into account to come up with the structure that's set forth in this bill. The Office of Inspector General office in this bill is set up as an executive agency, but the Inspector General is not appointed by the governor and does not report to the governor. The legislature takes the most active role in hiring this position. Separation of powers concerns guided us away from making the legislature the exclusive source of this function. However, the structure requires bipartisan participation to put forth 3 names for final selection by the Chief Judge of the Office of Administrative Hearings. The executive needs to have some role in the selection process to satisfy separation of powers concerns. From my perspective, being here today, when it comes to legislating, a reality that I'm reminded of often is don't let the perfect get in the way of good. I think most of us here agree that legislative action is necessary is a necessary element to truly clamp down on waste, fraud, and abuse. And given the political realities here in the state of Minnesota, we're going to need to work together to achieve this, and that's why I'm here today, to collaborate and be open to suggestions on the best way to move forward in our role as legislators to help protect taxpayer dollars to prevent waste, fraud, abuse here in Minnesota. I'd like to thank Senator Gustafson for her efforts here to bring different parties together, make this a truly bipartisan effort, and I look forward to participating in this committee today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cruen. Members, we're going to open it up to any public testimony that we might have, and then we'll open up to member questions.
At some point, you want to let them know that you have one.
We have a testifier, Mr. Rich Neumeister.
You might want to do
Sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry, Mr. Neumeister. So we had an amendment here. Senator Gustafson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Zhang. It is Amendment 7, which I believe is, or the A7, which is a delete everything.
Senator Gustafson, to your amendment. Senator Gustafson offers the amendment and moves the A7 amendment. All in favor of the A7 amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. The amendment is adopted. And then with that, would you like to do a walkthrough of the amendment? Yeah. Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Chair Zhang. So if you look, just as the bill stands now, that it's in the shape that we need it to be in, Section 1 will require the OLA to refer public tips on fraud as defined in Chapter 15D to this OIG. Section 2 includes the appointment inspector general to the list of positions whose salary is determined by the Compensation Council. Section 3, Office of the Inspector General, it creates an independent office of the Inspector General, provides OIG to report to the Chief Administrative Law Judge, establishes the Inspector General as the head of the OIG, and clarifies that the Inspector General is an unclassified employee. Section 4 will provide definitions to establish the purview of the OIG. Section 5, Subdivision 1 provides the minimum qualifications that candidates must have in order to be considered eligible for the role of Inspector General. Subdivision 2 establishes the Legislative Inspector General Advisory Commission to field applications and recommend candidates to the Chief Judge of the OAH, who will make the final selection of Inspector General. Details of that advisory commission are also in that subdivision. Subdivision 3 establishes the term limits of a serving Inspector General and allows for an at-cause removal by the Chief Judge of the OAH. Section number 6, Powers and Duties, details the responsibilities of the OIG, which are to include various levels of investigation of state agency programs, providers and individuals, compiling of pretrial prosecutorial materials, and referring instances of fraud for prosecution, legislative policy recommendations, and reporting requirements. Section 7, Auxiliary Powers, establishes subpoena power, details requirements for compliance and inspections and investigations, establishes penalties for noncompliance. Section 8 is Data Practices, allows for data sharing from government entities as defined in Section 13.02, Subdivision 7A, in order to comply with the subpoena, provides that the OIG is subject to the Government Data Practices Act, and classifies the data collected or created in work product under IG as subject to Section 1339. Section 9, Resources and Appropriation, allows for hiring and management of staff, requires the employment of 2 licensed peace officers, establishes OIG staff as classified civil service members with exceptions. Staff are subject to Sections 15.039, Subdivision 7. This deals with the transfer of state agency personnel and allows for the OIG to contract with experts under 16C.08. Section 10, Reporting and Transparency, establishes a public reporting requirement, confidential information to be redacted. OIG will maintain a phone line and website for collecting public tips. Public tips can be made anonymously. Section 11, Professional Standards and Review, requires adherence to professional standards as recognized by the Association of Inspectors General of National Repute and others, allows Chief Judge of OAH to contract for external quality assurance reviews every 3 years, results of which are public. Section 12, Legislative Inspector General Advisory Commission. This creates a legislative advisory commission which will field applicants and make recommendations to the OAH for the hiring of an Inspector General. 8 members total, made up of 4 senators and 4 members of the House of Representatives. 2 members of the Majority Caucus will be appointed by Senate Majority Leader. 2 members of the Minority Caucus will be appointed by the Senate Minority Leader. 2 members of the Majority Caucus to be appointed by the Speaker of the House, and 2 members of the Minority Caucus to be appointed by the Minority Leader of the House of Representatives. Members are eligible for per diem as laid out by the rules of their body. The LCC will provide meeting space and staff for advisory commission, and IG must be appointed by January 1st of 2026. But wait, there's more. Section 13, the Office of Inspector General Establishment and Transition. It outlines a timeline for the Legislative Inspector General Advisory Commission to provide the recommendations to the Chief Judge of the OAH and the date of which the Chief Judge of the OAH must have IG appointed. Subdivision 2 requires the OIG be operational by September 1st of 2026. Subdivision 3 provides for the transition of employees from the agency OIG offices to their newly created Office of Inspector General. Provides for employees to keep their employment status and job classification in the transfer. Collective bargaining agreements preserved. Subdivision 4 transfers assets and unused appropriations for the existing agency OIGs to newly created Office of Inspector General. Subdivision 5 requires the Commissioner of Admin to provide office space for the OIG. Subdivision 6, DHS OIG transfer exception, including background studies, licensing, enterprise ops and policy, background studies, legal team, licensing legal team, Medicaid program integrity team, program integrity unit, and Medicaid provider audits and investigations team, program integrity unit. Section 14, Legislative Inspector General Advisory Commission, initial appointments and first meeting, requires appointments to the Legislative Inspector General Advisory Commission to be made by August 1st, 2025, requires the Legislative Inspector General Advisory Commission to convene their first meeting by September 15th, 2025. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Gustafson. And looks like you have another amendment to add on to this that will pass together as one.
Yes, thank
To
you,
the
Mr.
amendment.
Chair. It is the A8, which I believe has been handed out
All right.
to the committee.
Senator Gustafson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This provides some comfort language around open meetings. It says that the Legislative Inspector General Advisory Commission is subject to the requirements in Section 3.055, which is relates to open meeting laws in place. Thank you. We got all sorts.
Okay. Senator Gustafson, would you like to move to adopt the A7 with the A8 amended, as amended by the A8 amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator McQuaid?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, were you going to the vote? I have a question before we do that.
Yep, go ahead.
Thanks. Senator Gustafson, did you say that 3.055 is the open meeting law?
Senator Gustafson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Mayquade, it's my understanding, I have to confess, I don't have the statute memorized, but that is what counsel is advised telling us.
Senator McQuaid?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm being told that it's for the open meeting for the legislature laws. Senator Gustafson, it sounds like one of the first duties of this advisory commission is to talk about hiring somebody. And are they, I guess hiring is a little bit of a thing, right? It's people have a right to privacy as we're making hiring decisions, although their resume might be public. Is that discussion going to be subject to, like, people can watch people debate being hired?
Senator Gustafson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Mayquade, that would be part of the public hearing that the Legislative Advisory Council that's how they would participate in that public hearing. So while candidates would be vetted, the ones that move forward would be presented to a list of the legislative panel.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Senator McQuaid. And with that, we will move on Senator Gustafson's motion to move the A7 as amended by the A8. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The amendment is adopted. And then with that, Senator Gustafson, do you have anything else to add, or we'll go to?
No, Mr. Chair, I do not.
Thank you, Senator Gustafson. With that, we'll go to our first testifier. Sorry about that, Mr. Neumeister. Please come to the table, state your name, and you may proceed with your testimony.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Rich Neumeister. I've been an open government and privacy advocate since the 1970s here at the state legislature. I have a lot of insight on a lot of dynamics of open government and sunshine. So my testimony, written testimony, is very specific. I think it's important that as we dive Minnesotans in a new dynamic, we have to ask some tough questions. The Office of Legislative Auditor has done a fantastic job. So how does this new concept either comfort with or against or whatever? So as you discuss that, I think it's very important to look at that. I have reviewed Florida's, I've reviewed Virginia's, and I had a conversation with the Inspector General's Office of Pennsylvania. And those are tough issues you got to deal with. And I don't see a lot of that addressed in the bill. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'll go specifically to my comments on the A7 amendment. I think it's important, like I said, particularly in Section 1, when you say the legislative auditor must refer all reports from the public about potential waste. What does that mean? Does that mean that's going to be the new IG's job or whatever? What part of or cut of the pie of fraud and all those things we talk about is the new IG going to do, and what may the OAG or the legislative auditor not do? I think it's important that there be a dynamic that's complementary, and I don't see that being discussed. Now, how many reports does the OLA now get from the public? I think that's an important question to ask. As you continue on the next couple of pages here, I did my notes, you go on to page 4. The Legislative Inspector General Advisory Commission, well, what is it going to do? I, as a public, and many of your constituents are going to look, oh, okay, so we're going to have something new. They're just going to appoint an Inspector General, but what are they going to do? I think there needs to be some direction in that. I think there can be some, as the bill moves along, to flesh that out. And I'm glad that at least, Mr. Chairman, with the question of Senator May Quaid about finalists. See, when you're under Chapter 13D, the regular open meeting law, when there are finalists, those names are public. I would like to encourage language in here that says that if there's more than one, that the finalist names that are going to be reviewed, are public. I think it's just, I don't see where that's going to happen, but that's important from my perspective. On page lines 416, 417, what are state executive agencies and programs? Are they boards? Are they commissions? I think that needs to be more defined and more clear and concise. When we go further down, you talk about on lines 427 to 430, the role of a Department of Public Safety. And if you go over to Section 9, you're asking for at least two cops to do investigations, 2 law enforcement folks. So that behooves the question, are they going to do a law enforcement function or not? Are they going to do an investigation and then give it to somebody else to do the further criminal investigation? Civil is very clear in these type of situations or dynamics. So I think that needs to be fleshed out of what role is it going to play with the law enforcement agency. Now on page 5, private entity, are there limitations to what a private entity can be? On 5.4 through 5.6, a report, I'd like to see, not just put it on the website, but written reports be available. and be sent to the Legislative Reference Library. My final comment. I'm not interested, and I don't think you are and your constituents, to see the same old, which I've seen a lot of, same old. Things happen, we need sunshine, we need accountability, and it just flows away, or goes away. As the bill moves forward, a very important part of the law is Chapter 13, which is, this bill is now under, which is good for people will know what's public, what is not public. But that section also needs to be worked on quite a bit to make sure that there is real sunshine. There's no ambiguity, so that when reporters and the public ask, hey, who has been investigated and what has happened, you don't get the answer, can't tell you. Again, it depends on the agency and the clarity of the law. So that important part, which is going to be traveling on to the judiciary, which has been my home, and as I said to Senator Latz as chair the other day, it's part of my DNA in that committee. Been for a long time. I hang out there. So that will be some interesting issues. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I've shared with you in detail some questions of my written testimony, and then I pointed out just some various parts of the bill that I think do need some clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Newmeister. Members, open up to member questions. If anybody has any questions, we can go to members. Senator Coran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Gustafson. I know we all do share the vision of government ineffectiveness, as well as when it moves into the theft of government services. As we go through the amendment, it looks like some things have changed, but many things are still the same, and there isn't a clear delineation between the Office of the Legislative Auditor when we think about what an OIG does. And so when we have the terms of waste, to me, that doesn't fit into an Inspector General's office. The Inspector General, to me, is the referral source for all agencies and entities that have, well, in this case, with the clear delineation from the Office of the Legislative Auditor, who should be doing the pre-work, right? Their discovery and performance of making sure agencies are compliant with state statutes, operational effectiveness, and all of those things do not rise, in my mind, to the point of an Inspector General role. So I think we got a lot of work to do still on that. How I think both entities have to have very clear delineation of roles and responsibilities, and the preservation of the OLA, to me, is extremely important, not just because it's one of my favorite roles, but because of the role they serve. It must be maintained, and today I don't think there's any lack outside of resources of them performing their job and referring for criminal prosecution or further investigation when those things are necessary. And to me, I see an independent IG, a consolidated statewide, being their primary referral source, and the step before, and hopefully from the recommendation of a full investigation with all the capabilities in that entity to do criminal referral when it rises to that point. And I think there's a harmonious balance that would likely occur between the two? I think there is, because of, with again, distinct roles and independence, that if we see trends, I think then it would be us from a governing body to determine where and when, if we see issues that aren't being met that look like waste or ineffective government, that to me that's a resource issue, and to me would be then in the legislative auditor role for us to fund and make sure we have it staffed appropriately if we see trends in those areas, as we do today. And then others that move into more criminal or the true investigation, identification, taking referrals from the OLA and doing the full investigation and you know, all those aspects. But I think without having, with having waste in there, we still have a variety of challenges. And then if we go throughout the entire process, and I'll try to go through quickly, is even on section definitions of waste and abuse. Abuse and all those things, terms that we've used before, are general of government, but I think should be very specific in having a clearly defined role when we use those terms as it relates to functions within an inspector general's office. I think in the inspector general's office, if I look at something that says, hey, I think there's an analogous, maybe it's a compliance check of some sort. Maybe there's some tools that they have that don't allow the OLA to make those types of compliance checks on a routine basis. I'm just trying to use that as an example. I think each term has to be really clearly defined to make sure we don't cross and grade the responsibilities between those two important entities. And then, I guess I'll start with a quick question. Is the Chief Judge of the Office of Administrative Hearings agreed to make this appointment?
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Cran. It's a good question. Yes, we have met extensively with all of the stakeholders who would be addressed in this bill. So, yes, as of now, I have not heard otherwise.
Senator Coran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Gustafson. So in the case we agree, I think we originally had, or you had originally had the legislative auditor playing some role, and which is good, and to remove those requirements because one, it's not their role to maintain their autonomy and independence, but at the same time, I still see a whole host of legislative audit responsibilities again as buried in here. If we look in powers and duties. If we look at, section 6, the authorization elements, if you look at 414, 415, to 420, those look literally just roles of the current legislative auditor. Mr. Chair, Senator Gustafson.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, if I
Senator
could.
Gustafson.
Thank you, Senator Cran. A couple of things, and I certainly do not mean to interrupt you at all, but I just, maybe this will inspire other questions. So we have met quite a few times with Judy Randall, who does excellent work at the OLA, and for those of you who serve on OLA, thank you very much. There is a distinct difference, and I'm happy to kind of walk through that right now if you're okay with that. So the OLA will continue its legislative branch function while the OIG is an executive branch agency. So right off the bat, they have kind of two separate roles, and it's what establishes a little bit more of that independence. The OIG will improve upon fraud investigations by being able to proactively rather than exclusively review special programs. To put it in the words of Ms. Randall, who does an excellent job at OLA, OLA looks at more systems-based and patterns and a larger scope, whereas an OIG would look more at specific providers and recipients. And that is a gap that OLA has that doesn't work on that would be helpful to them in working in just a different capacity, but complementing the work of both of their duties. So we have also gone through the bill with OLA to make sure that we wouldn't be stripping away the responsibilities that they have and that they work hard on. So you will see that we have removed things like auditing from the duties. Auditing is something that we still list as an important qualification for somebody that we would hire, but it is not the primary duty of an OIG. It's a pretty distinctive difference, too, to make sure that the OLA's job duties are intact and that we are not treading on what they're doing. We really see this as a partnership with other agencies who are already in this line of work, but there is a significant gap that the OIG would fill.
Senator
Mr. Chair.
Coran.
Thank you, Senator Gustafson. And so with that, did you just, to simplify the statement, you're removing special reviews from OLA and inserting them or duplicating them in the Inspector General office?
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Coran. There's special investigations can still be a part of OIG and should be. If I don't, maybe I'm not answering the question correctly,
Mr.
but
Chair, Senator Gustafson.
Coran.
So special reviews as the division within OLA, I understand special investigations. That's exactly, this, to me, the only purpose for the Inspector General. And so that has its own separate delineation. But I think the precursor to that of the special review within the OLA, that must remain intact and not have overlapping responsibilities. And that's, I'm just trying to see, you made a reference about, well, their special review team is maybe somewhat limited, but I just want to make sure it's very clear. If you're speaking in this role, specifically not removing the special investigations out of the OLA, but special special, not special investigations.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think I misspoke and said special investigations when I meant special reviews.
Okay,
Those would save
okay.
the OLA, but I think my co-author
Senator
could
Gustafson.
say
Thank
more
you.
about it.
Senator Cran?
No, Senator Kroon, do you
Anything
have?
else? Senator Kroon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Cran, there's nothing in the bill that takes away any of the authorities or responsibilities from OLA, which would include special reviews.
Yeah. Mr. Chair.
Senator Cran?
Thank you, Senator Kroon. Yeah, and I just want to make sure we have the clear delineation that one, it is a role. Special investigations of Inspector General is literally, I think, their primary function. So I'm good with that. To move on to auxiliary powers. So help me understand, subpoena power, right, as we look in roles and responsibilities, we see subpoena power, and I think that's a necessary function for them. But is it really sufficient to be able to do the work necessary in all investigations to identify, once fraud has been, or the indication that a special investigation is warranted, that they have all the tools necessary? A subpoena is one thing, but in order to do surveillance and all of those types of things that may be necessary for a criminal enterprise, wouldn't they need warrant capabilities and all of the law enforcement, or other additional law enforcement capabilities, as well as an ability or as a tool in the toolbox? It doesn't appear, at least the way I read it, that they would have the full ability to thoroughly investigate and do all the things we need, surveillance, all those things that you have to really prepare a case for criminal prosecution. Is warrant something that you considered or left out, and what would be the reason?
Senator Gustafson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Cran. So some of the duties of the two licensed peace officers that are referred to in the bill will be things that will be addressed probably at Judiciary Committee. And you're right, those could probably use some more defining job performances. I know that we are cautious about stepping on different branches, about what those peace officers are allowed to do. And that's why we're looking forward to bringing it to Judiciary. But those are good notes, and we welcome your suggestions going forward.
Mr. Chair?
Senator Cran?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Gustafson, I do think it's critical because I do think they are the precursor, right? And I know we've had the conversations as well about charging, that they're not going to have that ability. But up until the charging point, I don't see any separation of powers violations or anything to give them the full capabilities. Having a peace officer without capabilities is a badge that means little. And so that, to me, I want them to be a part of the mix of all the skill sets, along with forensic auditing and all of those things should be skill sets attained in this global Inspector General's office. And so I think I would like, and we'll continue to work on this, to make sure that they have all the tools, and I believe warrant is the only thing that they'll be able to use to capture the data necessary that could be used in a criminal prosecution or to refer for criminal prosecution. And then I'm trying to go quickly, Madam or Mr. Chair and Senator Gustafson. The peace office, I think the term is, you've got put in 5 years, and I think I think 6 years. I think the other pieces, the other question I had, if we mirror the OLA kind of operational structure, review structure, we put in a very good process managed by the LCC, which I believe this would fall under from an operational administrative perspective, that 6 years, we got an annual review and a combination of peer review, and we do a kind of a broad search. We also have in the middle of that 6-year term, we have an independent review as well, an independent review that's in. So I think you already have a good structure that would be much better to mirror it. And the 6-year term, I think helps bridge gubernatorial elections and the potential that one could succeed beyond that. So.
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Karan. I'll address the second part of your question, then I'm going to hand it over to my co-author to talk about that other part that you had mentioned earlier. I would say that part of it, the independence, is to make this position as nonpartisan as possible. The more independent it is, the more this office will be respected and have that integrity necessary that I think Minnesotans are looking for, especially in this kind of work. The last thing we want is for anybody to look at this office as if they are as part of a witch hunt, right? This should be full of, again, I'll just go back to as nonpartisan as possible. By making it a 5-year term, it keeps it out of all election cycles and will honor that original goal of trying to keep it as straightforward as possible. And then if you don't mind, I'd like to hand it to my...
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Cran, going back to your previous question about the subpoena power and the auxiliary powers set forth in Section 7 of the bill. The way I look at it, those are auxiliary powers. If you revert back to Section 6, is kind of the general powers, and I don't see anything that would I prohibit at all, in fact, going out to sites and doing some of that work that you were talking about in Section 6 of the bill. Now, Section 7 of the bill could be expanded on, particularly as Senator Gustafson said in Judiciary Committee, when we're talking about, exactly what the licensed peace officers might do. I think we could add to the auxiliary powers in Section 7, some maybe specific powers, but I don't want to take away from the general powers set forth in Section 6 either.
All right, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Kroon, and I agree. I just want to make sure it's comprehensive and they have all the tools necessary. I'm not interested in shuffling the chairs of government again to have the same outcome. And so to have another group that already is replicated, right? The OLA can do a lot of things. They have subpoena power and all those things. And yet it doesn't lead to, it leads to criminal referrals, which is where I think the IG should serve that primary role from a global perspective from the state of Minnesota. Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, we're all committed to this and it's core to my existence in government, as you know. And so what agencies will you consolidate resources from? I don't see them named here. Because we have 4 agencies with now an expansion, or maybe it looks like 3 current official inspector generals, Department of Human Services, I think DCYF is creating a new one. The DOC has an inspector general, and Department of Education has an inspector general. I don't see those delineated that those are going to be absorbed. And if they are, how will we know, and what's the delineation? Because many other agencies have the same capabilities. We just don't label them Inspector General's office. We have a criminal division in Department of Revenue and a wide variety of the same types of resources. So where is it, and how will we know which entities will then, or portions of those functions from all agencies, be rolled into this new IG office? Where will that be defined?
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Karan. If you look under resources and appropriation, I think this is the first part of your question, is what resources will they have available to them? They may hire, manage staff, including certified. It's spelling out that they have those resources to contract with. And maybe that wasn't the first part of your question. To answer what I think you're trying to get at is, we can take the existing embedded inspector generals and put them into a central office of the Office of Inspector General. I know one of the concerns that you and I had talked about is when they're embedded, it creates a problem of, how independent are they, right, if they are part of that agency. Now, we have one specific, a federal guideline that we need to honor in the DHS section of the Inspector General. But outside of that, we have an internal Department of Corrections Inspector General, one at the Department of Education, and one other that I cannot think of right now. Thank you. DHS, yes, the one.
DHS, DCYF.
Yes.
pardon.
And so with those, there are federal guidelines that we need to honor because the federal government requires that we have an internal inspector general within that department. However, looking at some of those duties that will be overseen by the independent Office of Inspector General is our only hybrid model. Everything else would move into that central office of an Office of Inspector General so that it is truly independent and can still work within those expertise areas, but maintain that level of independence.
Mr. Chair?
Senator Coran.
Thank you, Senator Gustafson. And with that, though, but you didn't answer the last part of my question, which was, are we doing analysis of all other state agencies who have similar capabilities? They're just not branded as an inspector general. A variety of them have criminal divisions who perform the same type of work, and should we at least evaluate those for consideration and moving those same resources to have a global perspective on investigating types of fraud that, I mean, the value of bringing it is consolidating and have a global look throughout the entire state.
Senator Gustafson or Senator Kroon?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Cran. Yeah, I mean, the operative language here I think you're getting at is in Section 13, Subdivision 3, line 8.18. If you think that, I think what, and I want to make sure I'm understanding your concern correctly, that language isn't broad enough to encapsulate all of the positions that you think should maybe be rolled into this new office. Is that getting to the heart of your question?
Mr. Chair?
Senator Coran?
Yes, Senator Crone. Yep. I just think we should be comprehensive and do an analysis of each and every agency where appropriate. If they have duplicative resources that can be benefited by rolling them into a centralized inspector general office, we should include those. Just because they have a title doesn't mean those functions don't exist. That's my point. So, Mr. Chair?
Thank you,
So with that,
Senator
I'll just leave with my closing comment. So I'm sorry to occupy most of the time, but to me, the Inspector General is important. And what we need to do is continue to work on not only the scope, but also what accompanies it. Because no Inspector General office is going to be successful without the agencies performing at a much higher level than they are today. And the Inspector General's job is not to go out and go and to address the inefficiencies that exist, which has allowed some of this fraud to occur or to operate or to accelerate to the extent it has. The second piece of it, so that govern efficiency and effectiveness, we have to install, and now is a good time to do it, training methodologies and mechanisms that then make them agencies more efficient, and everybody wins in that scenario, and we have a bill being drafted for that. Actually, that one's drafted. Then I think the reporting requirements I don't see in here is, we've got some high level, but I think the reporting requirements for employees and everybody involved in suspicion of fraud need to be reviewed and strengthened, and we'll be drafting a version of that. So we look forward to working. At the end of the day, we want a solution that incorporates all of these things where we deem successful. On the next one, I think, is the data retention and schedules and policies. Our agencies are removing to delete emails in a more rapid fashion. They're at a year today. Many of them are having conversations that could be as little as 60, 90 days. No investigations will be successful no matter where they're done without that data. So that has to be an important component to it. And then I think the other piece is, and I think Senator Zhang brought, we've got a lot of great employees who are screaming that it's not working, and they're being pushed aside and threatened or retaliated against. So whistleblower lawsuit, whistleblower protection, I think Senator Mathews has up here later today. I think those are 5 primary elements that we've got to make sure what we move forward incorporates all of those things to make sure we do a great job. And then I think the other piece that's missing is not just the theft in the traditional manner in which we see it today, but I think the other capabilities that have to be considered are certainly around not just the theft of dollars. It's kind of what we track and it reaches the headlines today, but cybersecurity, data theft, and all of those things I think should be consolidated under the same Inspector General and the expertise added to this unit, so we have that global view. Thieves are very diverse in their creation or the implementation of their crime networks. And so I think that's one of those scale or scope things that we have to talk about as well, and to ensure that the tools are necessary, not just, we talked about warrant, but also the types of crimes and the technologies used to make sure that they have everything they need regardless of the threat, whether it be data, the attack on resources and systems, and/or the hard theft of real dollars. So with that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator
I
Coran.
absolutely appreciate your graciousness in allowing me to have this line of questioning, but I think it's important. We are all working on the same solution, so thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cran.
Mr. Chair, I just would also like to thank
Senator
Senator Coran, if that's okay, this is our first committee stop, so we welcome all of the feedback and look forward to, expanding where we need to expand. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair, with that,
Members, I just want to let everybody know that at 1:30, well, we have 3 other bills on the agenda, and I'm.
Mr. Chair,
Senator
so
Coran.
it's kind of along that line. This is the committee of origin. And so it's our job to have the most thorough vetting of this process. We know there's going to have to be many significant changes and reviews and additional stops. And so I'd like to request that we have a commitment as we move forward that it circles back through this committee. It's our primary responsibility to vet every aspect of it before it moves forward. So I'd love that consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a growing list also. We have 3 other bills. Next up is Senator Lang, then after Senator Lang will be Senator Drazkowski.
Well,
Senator
thank you,
Lang.
Mr. Chair. And first of all, just appreciate the bill. I think this is going to be a start to a good bill, a good office, and hopefully a little bit of accountability that we have some visibility on as a legislature, because I can tell you when it leaves our hands, either the money or the policy, we entrust it into these agencies and make sure that it's implemented in the correct way, both financially and in policy standpoint. So thank you for that. First of all, housekeeping question, right? There's a blank appropriation. What are we talking about size-wise? FTEs, what are we really looking at? Do you know?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Lang. We have a fiscal note that is coming. It's not quite done yet, but absolutely share that with you as soon as it's available. I'm sorry if I could just expand one. We are very mindful of the budget and mindful of, obviously, being careful of using the resources that we have available. As Senator Cran brought up, we have a lot of really good resources that are already available to us. So our idea is, by taking internals and moving them into a central office, that will alleviate some of the budget concerns. But I'll be able to expand on that more once our fiscal note is ready for you.
Thank you. Senator Lang?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess the next question, and Senator Coran had kind of touched on this, but the chat that we were having at the table is when the Office of Inspector General has the advisory council set up, and it goes through the process, and they go through their investigation, they have some findings that are, whether it's criminal nature or whatever. How does that enforcement aspect of it happen? Does it go to the Attorney General's office? Is it compulsory when it leaves the Office of Inspector General? What kind of power do they have to push it on to the next level?
Senator Gustafson or Senator Kroon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's really a battle over which one of us can find it first in the bill. I think Senator Kroon has it, so I'll let him go.
All right, Senator Kroon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's found, and Senator Lang, that's section 6, lines 421 and 422 of the bill. And it says appropriate authorities is how I think we purposefully drafted it that way, because each situation, depending on the facts and the laws that were violated, could warrant a different reference. So we didn't, I want to speak for Senator Gustafson, but I don't think we committed to have a specific referral source and to leave that open so that there could be some flexibility on a case-by-case basis.
All right, Senator Lang.
And I guess the important, thank you, Mr. Chair, and to either of the testifiers, is it compulsory? Is it something where the OIG will have, if they go to one agency and it gets left on a desk someplace, where we have political offices that will be, political elected officials that will be responding to this in one way or another, the OIG being specifically independent from all those executive or legislative branches, will they have a power to push this?
Senator Gustafson or Senator Kroon? Senator
Thank you,
Gustafson.
Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Lang. I was just going back to one of the concerns that or issues that Senator Coran brought up too. If you go to line 713, 7 through 715, it's asking the chief administrative law judge make contract for external quality assurances and review of the inspector general every 3 years. If there is a pattern of them not following through, that's going to get caught right away. I would imagine that because this is so public and so many of the reports will be public and they'll be working with the OLA and other agencies, that there will be a level of accountability there as well.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Lang, I want to make sure I'm understanding your question about the compulsory aspect of your question. Are you talking about compulsory referral or compulsory prosecution?
Senator Lang.
A little bit of both. Thank you, Mr. Chair. A little bit of both. And the only reason is the last thing I'd want to see is us to stand up an agency and have the ability to in-depth investigate all of these. And much like the OLA office, where every accusation is made and looked at and then it's vetted after the fact, the OLA's office looks at that, and I appreciate that fact. If the OIG is set up in a similar fashion where they're going to look at every, inbound, whether it's a whistleblower or whatever, if they don't have a way, and without having the law enforcement aspect within the OIG specifically, how do we make sure that it doesn't just end up on a desk? Even if it's one of those small items that may not rise to the front page news.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Lang. A couple things. There's no compulsory reference because that would be the job of the OIG to make that determination whether something warrants a reference to the appropriate authorities. As far as a compulsory prosecution, the problem with that, of course, there's constitutional issues, and those prosecuting authorities have their own sets of laws that they follow, and some of them are elected officials themselves, and so you can't, at least I can't think of a way to make them prosecute something, at least through this bill. But I think one of the advantages that this office would have that maybe doesn't currently exist when it comes to the issue that you're trying to get at is that this, as an independent, a completely independent agency, or as independent as we can make it, obviously, they could have a bully pulpit that in other existing agencies maybe don't have, or existing inspector generals don't have. And so if there's a case that very much warrants prosecution that is sitting on a desk somewhere, practically speaking, I think this office could bring that to light if that were to come about. So maybe not a perfect answer for you, but that's what I got for you.
Senator Lang.
I'm going to skip over a couple because of time, but can you talk to me about the time frame about, I believe the dates were August of this year and then September of next year. The advisory council will be established and operational by August of this year for the time frame. When you say operational, is that they are going to have all of their powers as of August this year, but they won't be fully functional until September of 26?
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Lang. So we need the appointments of the Legislative Inspector General Advisory Commission to be made by August 1st. So our respective leaders would have to, by August, have their senators and reps listed and ready to go for the committee. And then the Legislative Inspector General Advisory Commission has to convene their first meeting on September 15th. So if that makes sense. The two deadlines, one is just to make sure that we have our ducks in a row by the beginning of August, and then they have to have a first meeting by the end of September.
Senator Lang.
And the only follow-up I have to that is, not that you want to push it to the left any further, but if you push it left timeframe-wise, could they be up and operational by, session time next year versus the fall? It seems like a long time from now before, when all of this, fraud, waste, and abuse has been in the headlines.
Senator Gustafson.
I don't know. That's maybe I'm sorry, Mr. Chair,
Senator
that's
Lang.
maybe a question for the advisory council or the members that.
Thank you,
Gustafson.
Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Lang. The IG must be appointed, as the law is, or the bill is now, the IG must be appointed by January 1st of 2026. I think the time frame we set up is pretty typical for other offices and agencies, but if you want to fast track it.
Senator Lang.
No, that's all I got, Mr. Chair. I think it's a good bill.
Thank you.
This has definitely kind of been a gut punch to most legislators, again, when it leaves our hands money-wise or policy-wise, and it doesn't go the way we intend it to go. It tends to get our attention real quick, and I think that's why you see such a good bipartisan effort on this one, so thanks.
Thank you, Senator Lang. So we have Senator Drazkowski, Senator Barr, and Senator McQuaid. Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Gustafson, for bringing the bill. I think it's a really good start. And it's something that I am hopeful that this legislature will go through a process that is bipartisan, bicameral, and sends a bill that is very heavily supported to the governor's office, because we need to demonstrate to Minnesota that this is going to happen and that we mean business. Senator Kroon, you're absolutely right. The outgoing U.S. Attorney in Minnesota has a fraud problem, and I think all legislators are aware of that, and I think the people of Minnesota can be proud that we're actually acting upon it and acting upon it squarely. So thank you both for your leadership on this particular bill. And I will note, as Senator Cran brought up, there are a bunch of efforts like this. I've got a bill I'm working on yet that's in a much earlier stage. It's got some components to it that are not contemplated in this bill. I know Senator Cran's got some, Senator Barr's working on some, Senator Mathews, Senator Rasmusson. House File 1 in the House does this in a different way. We got House File 2 and House File 3 that also address fraud in the House going on, and probably a plethora of other things going on there. I think this is a very big undertaking, and I think it's a very, very key, necessary undertaking. And I think we need to get this right in terms of process. And that goes back to what Senator Curran said. I think either we need to, as a committee, lay this over and get in the workshop and work on it for a couple, 3 weeks or whatever, or maybe it's better to send it off to the other committees, have them do their work, and come back here and have additional components talked about, the additional tools of woodworking applied to it when it comes back to the workshop here again. But I think we need to be earnest in that, because providing amendments on the Senate floor or the House floor or in conference committee is not the way to accomplish this. Right now, at the rudimentary parts of the process is a place to do that. So, Mr. Chair, Senator Gustafson, I hope we can bring the bill back again or hang on to it. One of those two. I don't care what you do. I'll support either one, but we need to really be able to work on it. I've looked at some other models from other states, and thank you for the independent part of this. It is, you're right, Senator Gustafson, it is key that this be independent from all the rest of the functions of government, because those functions of government are going to be under its scrutiny. And so it's very important that we maintain that. And I've looked at some other examples, and I've looked for that one where the OIG's in the legislature, in the legislative branch, and I haven't found it yet in the other 50 states. Maybe it's out there, but I think Senator Kroon's point about separation of powers gives us a difficult time with that, and so that's probably why it's not there. But given that limitation, I think you've done a really good job, at least out of the chute here, of getting us into that position, including the legislature in the process while landing the agency in the executive branch. As I look at the bill, first of all, I think we should do a better job, or we should continue to work on contemplating prosecution. In this bill, whether it's directly involved in the Office of Inspector General, or whether there's some other relationship or approach, can we embed a prosecutor in a different agency who is an employee of the OIG? How can we tie a prosecutorial responsibility asset onto this office and not run into separation of powers issues? And I think we need to all put our heads together to do that, because my greatest fear is similar to those that other members have talked about earlier, and that's that we get to the point where we stand up this government agency, we spend all kinds of money, which, by the way, Senator Gustafson, if you need help finding money, I'll help you find places to cut to do this, because this is a priority, and I'm good at cutting. But the greatest fear is that we do all this work and we spend all this money, and then we get an office that can't do its job effectively, that runs into political obstacles in different places. So maybe Senator Kroon, Senator Gustafson, first of all, Senator Kroon, tell us about that obstacle to prosecution. If this is in the executive branch, why can't we have a prosecutor in this office?
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Drazkowski. I suppose theoretically we could brainstorm to come up, you mentioned embedded prosecutors that are employed by this office, embedded perhaps in other prosecution agencies, maybe is what you had in mind. I haven't thought through the legal implications of that. That would definitely be something I'd want to get Senate counsel involved in before we started changing other prosecution offices. I think that would, certainly would require heavy lifting in terms of statutory changes well beyond what we're doing here, but also could have constitutional implications as well for example, the Attorney General's office, which is a constitutional office itself. So I don't think we could do some of that work. It would be limited. I'm not saying necessarily it's impossible, but that would be a fun legal exercise to go through to see what possibilities could be there. But I do think ultimately those prosecution offices have their own statutory and constitutional charges that would be difficult for us to just come in and change through this bill. Not necessarily saying impossible, because I haven't thought through all the legal implications, but yeah, that's the best answer I have for you right now. Definitely would want to consult with Senate counsel on that issue.
All right, Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Kroon. Well, I think we need to put our heads together and think about all of those options, and I think together we can figure it out. But I think that function needs to somehow be tied to this office, and I think we can't let it go without doing that. I think we need to figure out how to do that, and let's not beat this horse right now because other people want to talk and there's other bills.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Drazkowski. The other part, too, is that some of this would be prosecuted by federal authorities, and so that would be probably impossible constitutionally to capture that element, even if we could figure out some of the state prosecution questions. Thank you.
Senator Drazkowski.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple other questions. As a bill is written, does the OIG now, as a bill is written, contemplate holding employees that don't do their responsibilities under the law accountable? So, for instance, in Feeding Our Future, that no one in the Department of Education reported to the Office of the Legislative Auditor, not one person in the entire department. And that's very well documented, and it's very clear that they're required to do that. So does this bill contemplate that? And I'm going to be bringing some legislation. We'll do some more in that area. But as it's written now, are those pursuits within the scope of the bill or the office?
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Drazkowski. Yes, that is a valid concern. I'm glad that you're working on legislation. I wonder, what we were just talking about here, I'm wondering if that might be something separate outside of this bill to address, as we're trying to narrow the scope and be very specific with what an OIG's office would do. But again, it sounds like all of us are working on this in different capacities, and it's something that can be considered. And it might make more sense to do it as separate legislation, but.
Thank you. Senator Drazkowski.
One last question, Mr. Chair, and I know in the interest of time, as we look at lines 4.27 through 4.30, and we call out a special unit within the OIG, it's like this part of the bill, paragraph 5 there actually starts to draw part of the org chart for the OIG. And it says, involving state law enforcement, public safety programs specifically. And I don't know that we do that org chart component for any of the other parts of government, so I'm wondering why, and certainly those programs need to be fully under this bill like all the rest. Why do we do that one specifically? Or if we are going to pull out part of the org chart, let's do the whole org chart. Anyway, those are my thoughts on that. I'd be interested in your reaction.
Yeah.
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Drazkowski. You're right, that is a special division. I think the idea or the thought behind it, although we're open to, considering the rest of the organizations, is that public safety takes up a significant amount of our tax dollars, and it's for a good reason. But we're also pulling in expertise from other departments, their internal inspector generals. So we have education, HHS, Department of Corrections. It makes sense that another entity that receives so many tax dollars would also have an area of expertise to it. But again, open to looking at the rest of the organization chart, because you're right, there might be others that we could also have special divisions for.
Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senators, for your work on this bill, and look forward to continue to work with you on it.
Thank you. Senator Barr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I don't want to belabor any of these points. Thanks for the work. All of us have had a lot of conversations about this. I do want to just quickly add that please bring this back to the Committee of Origin after all the other committees have had a crack at it and added and subtracted. I think we should have a last shot at this in the State Gov Committee. 2 questions about the bill. On 713 to 715, if I'm reading that right, it's kind of like the ALJ gets to go hire some watchers to watch the watchers?
Senator Gustafson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Barr. That's a very creative way of putting it, Senator Barr. Yes, the Chief Administration Law Judge may contract for an external quality assurance review of the Inspector General. It says may contract every 3 years and must make the findings able to be reviewed by the public.
Senator Barr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the may part is probably good. You might want to do that once or twice, or as now. We keep seeing we have all of these issues, and there's supposed to be somebody watching it or doing something about it or reporting it, prosecuting, and it never happens. So this would probably be a good way to make sure that the Inspector General is actually doing their job of not just finding and rooting it out, but also doing something about it. And I did want to compliment you on this being an executive branch function, but it looks to me like the legislative branch is going to be the one putting all of the names forward, and then the ALJ will choose from that. So it's pretty much a good combination of making sure nobody has the upper hand on anything, which I really appreciate. And as far as funding goes, I think for the foreseeable future, if you could stand up an OIG, it would more than pay for itself in short order, probably for multiple years to multiple biennium to come with the amount of money they save the taxpayer. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Barr. Senator May-Quade.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just would like the record to note how odd of a committee hearing this has been when I'm agreeing with Senator Cran and Senator Barr and Senator Drazkowski. But yes, I do think that this bill should come back to this committee before it goes, and I have told you that before, so that's not new. I'm going to bring in my human services hat for just a minute, because one thing we talk about in that committee is waste, theft, and abuse. And in part because the word waste is often used to describe services that we give to people with disabilities. And the way that we have talked about the OIG, this office in this committee, we're talking about prosecutorial authority and when do we bring in, the right level of law enforcement. And it really is getting around fraud, which is intentional and criminal in nature. And so when we get down to waste, and I think this was part of Senator Cran's earlier point, are we also expecting that they're going to be and here's a way that you could bill school districts differently for special education services that's more efficient, because it feels a little bit disparate and or just a little bit far away from what the purpose of the office is. And so, I'm not going to work on this bill between committees. I know you all will. So that's why I'm offering it here, is that waste, the way it is described here is so there's lots of inefficient things that we do, but the purpose of doing them are actually important for quality assurance, right? So it's inefficient, but it's important. Or it's meaningful, right? So not all therapies are effective. They're just meaningful, ongoing, right? They're not solving an issue, they're keeping an issue from becoming bigger, so on and so forth. So I do think that addressing that could be important. I do agree with Senator Cran that data theft is particularly important, and right now, going back to my students with disabilities, I'm really worried about the amount of data that has been shared with the U.S. Department of Education, and if there is theft happening upstream, I would really like our OIG to be able to get to that. And then, so 4.23 and 4.24, I guess, recommending legislative policy or changes to improve program efficiency and effectiveness. Half of me is like, yeah, I want to hear that. And then the other half of me is like, but when you're evaluating a program for effectiveness and efficiency, that's not always, like, efficiency isn't always the purpose of an entire program. And so I just want to be sure that, we're going to have 2 cops that are part of this, and we're going to have some, forensic auditors, and I'm not sure if this is like the right language to describe what it is that we want to get from them, although I want those things. The people we're describing are not necessarily that. And then that's not my one question, but I'll just shorten it up. I don't sit on judiciary, but are 2 licensed peace officers just 2 cops?
Senator Gustafson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I mean, we have recognized, even before this committee recognized that we are going to need to explain that further in judiciary, so we'll do that. But sure, yes. I mean, to answer your question, yes.
All right, Senator Mayquay.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I wonder, so one, make sure that they're full-time with this department, because I wouldn't want to be like lending out from other departments who also could be subject to OIG investigations. And then I'm wondering if we might need something more specialized or more experience, like it wouldn't be so-and-so like Brenda, who just graduated from the academy, but it would be like Deborah, who's been a detective for 10 years, right? Those are different levels of experience, and we might want more of the Deborah than the Brenda. But other than that, this is a great bill, and I think you both have done a really good job putting this together, and I'm really appreciative of the deep work and conversations and insights that have led to it. I would love to see it come back with a little bit more structure around what we mean about waste, and then what the office's job is to tell the legislature about efficiency, and then some clarification on our peace officers. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
I would say,
Senator Gustafson.
Mr. Chair and Senator McQuaid, thank you. One of the things I'll quickly mention too is I appreciate you highlighting that. Some of those things are done by the OLA, and those are those more overhead. The things that you're referring to would be more of an OLA role than it would be an OIG role. But good notes, we'll clean it up, and it sounds like we're all going to be hanging out again. So
right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Gustafson. Without any further discussion, Senate File 856, as amended, be recommended to pass and referred to the Committee on Judiciary. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. Motion passes. Senate File 856, as amended, is recommended to pass and re-refer to Judiciary. Thank you, Senator Gustafson and Senator Kroon. Actually, we had so for the next bill, we're moving up the agenda item a little bit, as we have outside folks. We have Senate File 449, Senator Cwodzinski, your bill, and then after that, Senator Rasmusson, we will do your bill. Senator Cwodzinski, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members, and thank you, Senator Rasmusson, for allowing this. The Public Broadcasting Act of 1967 authorized the creation of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. This system now reaches over 99% of the population with free programming and services. Minnesota has 6 public television stations that broadcast to cities throughout the state. I also, before I forget, want to thank Senator Lane for co-authoring this bill. It's nice to see, as we've witnessed today, on both bills we've heard so far, bipartisan support. These stations create and distribute content that is for, by, and about Americans of all backgrounds. They provide free, high-quality educational programming for children, arts programming, current affairs program, and life-saving emergency alert services. From Antiques Roadshow to American Masters, Big Bird to Bob Villa, Nova to NewsHour. I can't do NewsHour. I got to say McNeil Lehrer. I'm showing my age right now, so sorry. McNeil Lehrer, NewsHour, Downton Abbey, and to Doctor Who. Minnesotans rely on public television for crucial information as well as entertainment. When my kids were little, I was looking for them everywhere outside, and I couldn't find them anywhere. And gorgeous, sunny, beautiful summer day. And finally, I found him downstairs watching cable television. I ran upstairs and called my cable provider and canceled cable immediately, knowing that they would still have access to PBS and all the wonderful children's programming that it provides. I also just want to quickly draw your attention to this in the packets. And the last line in it is by a viewer that says, "It is a window into my local community that, for me, only exists on PBS." I think we all, well, I'm speaking for myself, none of us really appreciate PBS for all that it does like we should. It's an institution that, as I said, founded in 1967, and I hope it's around in 2067 with the graciousness of this committee. So with that said, we've got 2 testifiers. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for hearing the bill.
Thank you, Senator Cwodzinski. To the testifiers, I'm sorry, but can you keep your statements brief, as we have two other bills. Mr. Heen?
Yes.
Please state your name for the record, and you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Les Heen. I'm with the Libby Law Office representing the public television station. I will keep my remarks short. In short, I'd like to say that we like to say in public television in Minnesota that we do things differently than we do in many other states, and we think that's a good thing for not only our viewers but our taxpayers, because instead of a large institution that's operating a public university, we have members stations that are around the state that are independent nonprofit stations. Behind me today, you see a number of the volunteers, staff members, and board members from our 6 stations around the state, including a board member who was a member of this body not too long ago, Senator Senjum. So we're grateful to have them here today. And we also have, in addition to the other things that Senator Cwodzinski mentioned, we also have a map in your packet that shows where the stations are located around the state. It does not indicate all of the broadcast area we reach, because we do reach about 97% of the state's television audience. So with that, thank you, and I would like to turn
Thank
it
you,
over to
Mr.
introduce,
Heen. Ms. Mester, please state your name for the record, and you may proceed.
Thank you, Sharajan, and thank you, Senator Cwodzinski. My name is Patty Mester, and I'm the president of the Minnesota Public Television Association, also known as the MPTA. The state grants are critical in helping the MPTA serve our communities. The state operating grants are matching grants that require us to raise money locally before receiving the grant funds. By law, the matching grants may be used only to match funds from Minnesota-based contributors, and that means that all the stations have to work hard to build and maintain local community relationships and support. Matching grants and block grants are used to help fund the basic operations of stations, from programming costs to staffing and to paying utilities. Equipment grants help us to keep up with maintenance needs at the stations, and no matter whether a station is in Duluth, the Twin Cities, St. Paul, or Bemidji, we are all responsible to operate expensive transmitters and towers and other infrastructure as a part of our service to the public. So every station has local community advisory boards that help us determine the programs to produce and how to best serve our communities. We also have a long history of public accountability because we have had state grants for more than 50 years. All of our stations go through independent annual audits, and that information is part of our grant reporting. In addition, every 2 years, we submit documentation to the state to rectify our eligibility for the grants. Our station's stated as educational television, and our online programs are used by teachers and homeschoolers across the state. Our stations provide lifelong learning opportunities, with 1/3 of our primary schedule dedicated to educational programs for children, and we estimate that approximately 20% of our state's teachers have used our programs. We also are proud of our work with the legislature in distributing legislative television statewide for more than 15 years. And finally, our over-the-air programs and online content are provided free to the public, and all you need to do is have an antenna or an internet connection to receive our programs. And just for the record, many of the stations, PBS has been around for approximately 56 years, and many of our stations have been here for over 60 years. So we were here first. I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be with you today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Mester. Members, any questions? Give back to Senator Cwodzinski. Any closing comments?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. With no further discussion, Senate File 449 is laid over for possible inclusion. Thank you to the testifiers. We really appreciate what you guys do. Thank you. With that, Senate File 263, Senator Rasmusson. And it is the Legislative Auditor Bill. Senator Rasmusson, please state your name and you can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If the committee would entertain the A2 amendment as an author's amendment, it would be greatly appreciated before I begin.
And Senator Rasmusson offers the A2 amendment. Senator Drazkowski moves the A2 amendment. All in favor of the A2 amendment, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. The amendment is adopted. Senator Rasmusson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to talk today about the important work that the Office of the Legislative Auditor does. I think we would all agree that the OLA plays an important role in auditing entities that receive public funding from this legislature and helps hold those entities accountable and also gives us a roadmap to how we can improve accountability and performance among entities that receive public funding. One issue that I've noticed, and I think others have noticed over time, is that these entities that are audited by the OLA, including our state agencies, do not always implement the recommendations that are made by the Office of the Legislative Auditor. And many times the Committee of Jurisdiction over those entities has limited visibility into what recommendations have been implemented and which ones have not been implemented, and if so, why they haven't been implemented. This bill would help ensure that committees know what OLA recommendations have been implemented within their committee jurisdiction. If we look at the bill and the timing starting in Section 2, MMB, which is already required to review audit reports from the OLA and take appropriate steps, MMB would submit a report to the OLA no later than September 1, detailing the implementation status of any recommendations that have been made over the previous 5 years. And then by February 1st, the OLA would then submit reports to committees with financial jurisdiction over entities subject to the audit. And then by July 1, the OLA would report back to the leadership of a few key committees, including this one, that would show which committees have invited the OLA to come and present on this implementation report and those findings. Again, this bill is fairly simple, but I think it'll take the important work that the OLA is already doing and enhancing accountability and follow up on their recommendations. With that, Mr. Chair, I think we have a couple testifiers on the bill.
Thank you, Senator Rasmusson. We have Judy Randall, the Legislative Auditor, here. And then next up will be Rayanna Lee, Legislative and Coalitions Director. Ms. Randall, please state your name for the record and you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, for the record, my name is Judy Randall, Legislative Auditor. Thanks for taking the time today. I'm mostly here to answer questions, but I do just want to spend a minute to talk about what I think was just handed out, which is this recommendation updates report. We actually talked about it the last time I was here in committee, and I believe Senator May-Quade wanted the list of recommendations to the legislature. You'll find that starting on, I believe, page 25 for that. But this is kind of a proof of concept, if you will, in terms of what this bill could result in. We already do some of this work, as you see, but we have limited resources to do it. So the way we produced this report, and this is just on our program evaluations and special reviews, my understanding, if the bill were to be enacted, it would cover all of our reports, including our performance audits. So what we do is we go back to the agencies where we have made recommendations and conducted evaluations and said, okay, here were the recommendations we made. Tell us what you've done and what you haven't done. So they provide that information kind of through a self-attestation. And so then what we try to do with our current resources is do some verification to see, did they actually implement it? They said they implemented it, but we need to, of course, confirm. We're, trust but verify type of shop. So if you turn the page to any agency, you'll see different types of statuses, implemented, not implemented, partially implemented, but additional work needed to confirm. Implemented are those things that we could easily confirm. So, agency create a policy to do X, Y, Z. They said they did that. They send us the policy. We're like, yep, good. Not implemented, pretty obvious. The one where I just wanted to spend a second is on the work needed to determine implementation. That means that OLA didn't have the resources to confirm or not whether the recommendation had been implemented. It would require, that would be a recommendation like, actually follow the conflict of interest policy, right? So that would require us going out, doing a file review, and confirming. So that's where that work needed to determine is on OLA, not on the agencies, but I think this bill would encourage us to do more of that and would provide some of the resources to do it. So that's all I'll say now, but I'm happy to answer questions if there are any as you go on. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Rayanna Lee. Please state your name for the record, and you may proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Rayanna Lee. I'm the Legislative and Coalitions Director for the Americans for Prosperity chapter here in Minnesota. In the interest of time, I'll just make my remarks really short, but we are very supportive of this bill. It really reflects the values that we all hold dear, trust, responsible stewardship of hard-earned tax dollars, and the belief that government should serve Minnesotans effectively and ethically. Accountability is not just about identifying problems, it is about fixing them. And it is worth noting that Senate File 263 doesn't just ask questions, it offers solutions. And by requiring these kinds of reports, it creates a culture of openness and continuous improvement. And this doesn't only benefit the public, but also the agencies themselves, helping them operate more effectively in earning the trust of the people that they served. Some people might worry that this extra level of scrutiny might add additional work for agencies, but I think it's very important to see this as an opportunity rather than a burden. Accountability is not about blame, it is about partnership. And when we have agencies and legislators working together to address challenges, everybody wins. Government programs run more smoothly, and the public can gain confidence in the institutions that serve them. And this is, as we've seen, especially important to catch issues early as they snowball, before they snowball. So we thank Senator Rasmusson for his leadership on this, and we urge your support of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions or comments on the bill before you?
Mr. Chair.
Senator Rasmusson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also just wanted to note, weren't available to testify today, but there's a letter of support, I believe, in members' packets from the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits as well, talking about the benefits they would see from this bill.
Oh, and looks like there's the fiscal note with it. Maybe, Andrew, you can share with us a little bit more on it.
Mr. Chair, members, yes, I can briefly walk through the fiscal note that has been reported for the bill. Based on the amendment to the bill, I don't think that it would change anything dramatically. I suspect that because it says as resources permit, it would sort of allow some flexibility, but because fiscal notes are advisory, I would have expected that the OLA would still advise that these are the resources they would like to see, with the understanding that legislators may provide or not provide those resources as they see fit. With that said, the OLA has reported $238,000 in the first year and $259,000 ongoing, which would fund 2 different FTEs for the purposes of producing these reports. MMB additionally has $41,000 annually for a fractional FTE that would be divided among several FTEs that already exist and perform similar work. but would increase the amount of work that that division is producing to comply with the bill. And that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And thank you with that. Any member questions? Senator, was it Senator May-Quade?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just so I'm clear, this bill is putting this in certain chairs' hands?
Senator Rasmusson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator May-Quade. This is an idea of the types of reports that would be put in. I believe this just covers special reviews. The other elements that would be covered under my bill would be basically all of the financial audits and program evaluations and special reviews that the OLA does. So the report that you see in front of you that Auditor Randall provided is kind of a taste, but it would actually be more comprehensive in terms of what committee chairs and ranking members would be receiving on an annual basis. Or anything else?
Senator May-Quade?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there's no new information that's going to be collected or made public. It's just compiling it in a different way, or is there new information that doesn't currently exist?
Mr. Chair.
Auditor Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Senator May-Quade. It's a great question. So what the bill would do is provide resources for us to be able to go out and confirm and verify and actually look to see if the agencies have implemented the recommendations. So if you look in this sample report, wherever you see work needed to determine implementation or implemented but additional work needed to confirm, those are all the holes that would be filled in because we would have 2 staff who do this full time. So it's following up on the recommendations that have been made and then providing you, the legislature, information to say, yes, this has been implemented, or no, it hasn't. And then for those areas where it hasn't, that may be an opportunity for you to have additional conversations with them. So it's keeping the reports a little bit more alive going forward.
Mr. Chair, if I'm...
Thank you, Senator May-Quade.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My last question is, couldn't we have agencies report out if they did it or not?
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator May-Quade. And as a part of current statute, the Commissioner of M&B is already supposed to review the audit reports from the OLA and take appropriate steps to address internal control problems found in those agencies. I think one of the concerns that I have is that as you can see in Ms. Randall's report, there's 2 areas that are concerning. One is sometimes these agencies aren't implementing the recommendations, and then sometimes we don't know if they've implemented the recommendations. So the idea behind this bill is that we would actually have greater visibility into what recommendations are being implemented or not, and we'd also have a trusted third-party entity that works for the legislature to verify that agencies are doing what they say they're going to do and what recommendations have been made. There's nothing that forces the agencies to actually do these recommendations, and if there is a valid reason why they aren't implementing, the bill allows them to state why those reasons are. I think for me, I think the OLA does fantastic work, but I oftentimes think beyond the legislators that are highly involved with the OLA's work, sometimes there isn't that accountability, that follow through on asking agencies as they're presenting their budgets to ensure that these recommendations are being at minimum addressed and hopefully implemented and taken advantage of.
Senator May-Quade.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that just after the last bill that we had and then this bill coming forward, I think the thing that I just keep coming back to is are we going to just keep saying that the legislature has no role in oversight? And I think, we're time bound, right, in the Constitution for how often we can meet, and I think that is binding our ability to do proper oversight in this legislature. I know our neighbors to the east have a oversight session, and so I think the more that we keep saying we couldn't possibly do it, and we need a third party always, right? And they're the only ones who can do it, and they're the only ones who could tell us. And I just feel like we're continuing to undermine both the authority we were given by the voters, but also our ability to be involved in our government. And so this isn't specific to your bill, Senator Rasmusson. It's just the thing. It's that trend that keeps coming up is we couldn't possibly do it, so we got to have somebody else do it, and that is part of our job, and we just don't have time to do it, and that's a problem.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Rasmusson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator McQuaid, to your point, I think the legislature doesn't do enough oversight. And I think one of the purposes of this bill is actually to enable legislators during session to have more information to exercise our oversight function. And that's why these reports are due February 1st to the chairs and ranking members of the relevant committees. And we ask both MMB and OLA to do this work during the interim so that when we're in session, when we're getting budget proposals, we're armed with that information to try to, in our short period of time, maximize the opportunity we have for oversight. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Rasmusson. Any other questions or comments? Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if I missed it, but did I hear somewhere, maybe in a different forum, about an audit note that could arise out of this? So when we've got bills before us or agencies before us, they get a score of some sort. Is that what Senator or Representative Nash was talking about in the other body?
Senator Rasmusson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Drazkowski. That has been an idea that's been talked about by legislators. It is not included as a requirement in this bill, but I think it is something that could be considered in separate legislation.
Thank you.
Senator
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Drazkowski. Any other questions or comments? Senator Rasmusson, I had some concerns about the bill. How does this bill prevent fraud from occurring? I mean, the OLA is already doing the reporting. We, as a legislature, send in our requests. Could you elaborate more on that for us?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and we had an opportunity to have a hearing in the Senate Human Services Committee on, having the Office of Legislative Auditor come in and talk about some reports and the agency also engage. And I think one of my takeaways from that hearing we had was it's not that we lack enough statutes or we lack enough rules or even agency policy, but unfortunately, we find time and time again that agencies aren't following best practices, they aren't following statute, they aren't following their own policy rules, and having the OLA have more resources to not just make recommendations, but ensure that agencies are following through on the recommendations and implementing them, I think will improve accountability and transparency. One of the key findings that the OLA has brought to the legislature's attention multiple times is the lack of a centralized grant management function across many state agencies. And so this would, again, highlight that to every committee of jurisdiction and show which agencies have implemented this, which ones haven't. And maybe us as legislators would be able to use that information to demand that agencies implement policies like that to help reduce fraudulent activity.
Thank you, Senator Rasmusson. Well, members, this bill looks like from the language of the bill, requires 2 different offices to compile additional reports, to submit them to the legislature. My concern is what Senator McQuaid had raised. It increases bureaucratic busy work. And, did someone have a comment? Senator Johnson, sir, I'll save my comments for the end.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Senator Rasmusson, you said that this bill would ensure that agencies follow through. I don't actually think it would ensure. Isn't this just a reporting kind of, that is just letting us know which ones have indeed followed through, but I don't understand how is this ensuring anything? Senator
Rasmusson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Johnson Stewart. I think this will improve accountability. Again, the OLA isn't going to force agencies to implement the recommendations, but it will provide visibility and accountability to the appropriate legislative committees to show in black and white which of these recommendations have been implemented, which ones haven't. And I think that will encourage agencies to implement the recommendations, and will also allow us as legislators to better ask questions, direct agencies through our budget bills to follow up on the OLA recommendations. Thank you, Senator
Rasmusson. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, so just going back to what I said earlier, I'm a little concerned about it increasing bureaucratic work without sort of the enforcement piece of it, or follow-up piece of it, sorry, not enforcement piece of it. What are you looking for this bill to go next to, Senator Rasmusson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My wish would be to have this bill go to the Finance Committee and, continue to talk about, what are good options for funding these additional resources to allow the OLA to do this additional work.
Okay, thank you for that. I would like to lay this over and see if we could do a little bit of work on it. Maybe add what Senator Gustafson had mentioned about adding the notes to it. What would be your response to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the idea that Senator Gustafson brought up around fraud notes is a good one. I do think it might be good to have in a separate bill, just to make sure that, we're talking about those ideas in discrete ways. Again, what we're doing here is we're taking recommendations that the Office of the Legislative Auditor is producing, and we're giving them additional resources to help figure out whether agencies or other audited entities are following through on their recommendations, so that the legislature has the information we need to hold agencies accountable, to understand what work is being done and what work is not being done. And so I think, if there's ideas, suggestions on improving the text of the bill before the committee, I'm happy to consider any of those suggestions now or in the Finance Committee.
All right, is there a motion from the committee? I would move to lay it over for possible inclusion, or unless somebody has a different motion. Senator Lang?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I think I'd like to see it move on, even if it does need additional thoughts or amendments of one kind or another. I don't know, we could put that request in, much like the last bill, to have it come back to the committee before and then hold it for omnibus after it goes through finance. And is there a judiciary stop in your future, Senator?
Okay, but is there, Senator McQuaid?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would agree with you. This is the policy committee, and we're the finance committee too, but the finance committee is just going to deal with how much money. And so if we're not feeling good about the language, which I'm not there yet, I enjoy working with you, Senator Rasmusson. Again, I'm not working on these bills because this is not my area right now, but I don't think this is ready to move on to finance. And so I would support laying it over until we feel like we can pick it back up and do some amendments, but we couldn't do those in finance. And so I would support laying it over.
Senator Ann Johnston Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would formally move if you're looking for a motion to lay it over.
I think for a motion to lay over, we might not need a motion to lay over, but is there a different motion from anybody? All right. With no further discussion, Senate File 263 is laid over for possible inclusion. All right. And then next we have, Senator Mathews, Senate File 475. Thank you for your patience, Senator Mathews. And with that, please state your name, and you may proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate you allowing my bill to be heard. Senator Andrew Mathews presenting Senate File 475. Mr. Chair, this bill has already made a stop and passed out of the Labor Committee after it got critiqued and modified by members of both parties in that committee. You'll see that we have bipartisan co-authors on the bill. The point of the bill is to expand the protections to potential whistleblowers of that are in employees of our state agencies when they feel that they need to highlight and bring attention to something that may not be getting done correctly or properly. They need to have some stronger assurances that they can actually feel confident enough to stand up and speak out and not feel intimidated or harassed or threatened or retaliated against. So the bill, I'll walk through it here quickly, Mr. Chair. We add some definitions in the beginning part of the bill that matches other parts of statute. And then starting in section 4, we just are adding some terms in the already existing whistleblower protection statutes. And the main page is what you'll see on page 3. And it's going to expand the number of reporting entities that a potential whistleblower can speak to and have these whistleblower protections in them. And they would include reporting to their employer, to any governmental body, to a law enforcement official, the legislative auditor, a member of the legislature, or a constitutional officer. So having that expansion of who they can report to, I think, would be wise. It would help us as legislators have more information to make better decisions, to be able to hold agencies accountable and ensure they're following through on what they have been tasked to do at the legislature. There is some whistleblower protections in law, but based on the number of people that are still pointing out to us that they feel retaliated against, my view is that the current law is not going far enough, and we should try to find ways to grow and expand their protection so that we as legislators can actually get the information that we need to have. There have been even 1 or 2 employees that have indicated they would want to come and testify publicly in support of this bill, but they don't feel comfortable enough in their current situation to be willing to step forward and do that at this time. So the bill has made through one stop already. I'm glad to have the bipartisan support on this so far, and I'd be happy to take any questions from your committee.
Thank you. Any member questions or comments? Senator McQuaid?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just, I don't know, Senator Mathews, if you were here earlier when we had Senator Gustafson and Senator Kroon's bill for the OIG. We just would be potentially putting wildly different definitions of abuse and fraud and waste into statute. And I don't know, we should reconcile that, right? We should not have an OIG that has different definitions than whistleblowers do. That is my first note. And I think we should get that right before it leaves committee.
Senator Mathews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make note of that. We'll go back and study that. My first thought is they are potentially different roles as well. A large office may have different aspects of it that they need to look at, but it is a valid point. What we basically did is we copied the text from when we created the education OIG office back in 2023. So all we did definition-wise is just copy and paste from similar protections, similar language already used in another part of statute that was created recently.
Senator McQuaid?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would, but then I'm wondering if maybe the OIG, or if we need to go through statute and redefine in all the places where we're talking about fraud against government agencies, that we get the right definitions, because if, these are all leading into one place.
Thank you, Senator McQuaid.
Yeah.
Maybe council can kind of educate us on how, maybe what the best practices in this type of situation might be.
Madam Chair and members, it might make sense to make the definitions all consistent throughout statute. There might be reasons why you would want different definitions in each chapter. I'm not sure about this batch of definitions, if they should match.
Thank you.
Maybe should.
Thank you, council. Senator Mathews.
Mr. Chair, Senator McQuaid, I've jotted that down for action items I'll take after the hearing.
Thank you, and thank you for waiting with us. I like this bill. I think it has a good purpose, and I look forward to seeing it move forward. And with that, I will move it to, we're referring it to, re-referring it. Right. Senator McQuaid.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Senator
Thank you, Mr.
Gustafson.
Chair. I think we have the same thought. You go ahead, Senator Chair, and then
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is actually the committee where we would do that. So I think we should do that before, I don't know where it's going next. But unless it's a different state gov committee, this would probably be the place where we would make those definitions clear.
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I concur. I'm wondering, this is maybe a question for council, is there a legal definition that I know I've worked closely with council on this committee for the bill that we just heard, but are there actual legal definitions that we can point to that will consolidate these definitions into one workable cross-reference? Yeah.
Council.
Madam Chair and members, not that I'm aware of. I think we define these terms differently in different places of the statutes, but we can work to make them consistent within the topics that state government considers and look at other topics as well.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Mathews, I would offer and I think what I'm seeing here too, and I'm looking at the definitions in your bill and the definitions in Senator Gustafson and Senator Kroon's bill, and I think that the definitions you came over from the education section do make a lot of sense in education, but if we're going with whistleblower, I think we should go broader. And so I would offer, and I'm going to say it as an oral amendment, but because we have paper in front of us, abuse means the misuse of authority or position for personal gain or to cause harm to others, including the improper use of state resources or programs contrary to their intended purpose.
Senator Mathews.
Is there a way to get that in writing for me?
Yes, council. Thank you, Senator Mathews. We can get it in writing, but it'll just take a little bit. Maybe in a couple minutes here. Senator Mathews, would it be okay if we move the amendment orally?
If council would be willing to repeat it for me first.
Senator, Senate Council?
Madam Chair and members, Senator McQuaid's proposal is on line 1.8 to delete everything after means and insert the misuse of authority or position for personal gain or to cause harm to others, comma, including the improper use of state resources or programs contrary to their intended purpose. And then on page 1, delete line 9, and on page 1, delete line, on page 1, on line 10, delete everything before the period.
Senator Mathews?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I definitely see that it would work to replace that first sentence. In just reading it over, and I'm going from the hip here myself, I think that second sentence on 1.9 to 1.10 of my bill still might be worth keeping on at the end in this bill as far as definitionally, just giving some more context to it. So I would potentially propose having the oral definition just replace line 1.8 and 1.9 up to the period, but would be happy for further thoughts or questions.
Senator McQuaid?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you just say a little bit more about that last line? When I was reading it, I was actually like, that must come, like caution, coffee is hot. Like, where did that come from? There's a reason for it.
Senator Mathews.
Mr. Chair, Senator McQuaid, because I think it's getting at the heart of what we've been dealing with as a state. People taking things that they don't have legal entitlements to certain payments. So while maybe it's a little repetitive or some comfort language, it's shining an exact spotlight on the exact problem that we're having right now in the state as far as people taking advantage of services or payments that they have no legal entitlement to.
Thank you for that, Senator Mathews. Senator Gustafson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Mathews. Wondering, feel free to say no, or you can look at it, but does it make sense in the spirit of bipartisanship and that we're all working on these bills, a lot of us together, to just adopt the definitions that were used in the bill heard earlier for the OIG bill? There's definitions for fraud, investigation, waste, abuse, agency, program. Something to consider, and I can provide the bill language to you if you'd like, but
He's holding mine.
does that make sense?
Senator Mathews.
Mr. Chair, Senator Gustafson was just given a copy of it, so I'm going through it for the first time now. Definitely open to that discussion. I don't know if we're taking them one at a time or going down the list. So my initial thought with the first one we're working on is I think maybe still a merging of the two that we have together. Fits the purpose of my bill, what we're going for, but happy to keep working with you, Senator Kroon, Senator May-Quade, and the others on how we're ironing these all out at the end.
Senator May-Quade.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would support Senator Gustafson's motion to insert the definitions of abuse, fraud, and waste from the A7, delete all from Senate File 856 as the definitions in Senate File 475.
Senator Drazkowski.
Go ahead.
Thank you,
Senator
Mr. Chair. You know, it may make sense to at least align them for now. I think it makes sense to try to consolidate meanings so that we can have the same meaning in different parts of related law, so we don't get confusion and things that are incongruent. Would it make sense to adopt this today and then Senator Gustafson and Senator Mathews stay on the phone? Because Senator Gustafson, your language may change too as it goes forward. So you may want to just keep it aligned through the process. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Drazkowski. Senator McQuaid?
I mean, yeah, Senator Drazkowski is correct, Mr. Chair. And I think this would be the place where we would do it at least that one time, and then we get in the habit of changing them as they move along. So if Senator Gustafson's changes, Senator Mathews changes, and we just try to keep them aligned as they move. And today would be a good starting point.
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it goes to judiciary after this. Is that correct, Senator Mathews?
It is.
Yeah.
Senator Mathews.
Mr. Chair, I haven't gotten final confirmation on that, but I've heard that rumored.
Senator Gustafson.
Mr. Chair, thank you. So wondering if, just like our bill will end up back here, if after it makes that judiciary stop, if it comes back here as well, and we can obviously, you and I work together on those definitions to line them up, and then everything is working together.
All right. Senator Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm kind of with you guys. I think the definitions possibly could be interchangeable. However, I think they're a little more specific in Senator Mathews' bill to address the idea of the bill. And I'm a little hesitant to jump on changing them to coincide with the other bill just yet. I think maybe we pass it as is with the intention of judiciary. If you have a amendment when you walk in there that is kumbaya, that we put it on there. I haven't had enough time to look at it in depth yet either, but.
Thank you, Senator Lang.
Mr. Chair.
Senator McQuaid, you have a motion on the table. If you would withdraw, if they can commit to you and pinky promise that they will work together to get that free. Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think bringing it back here at the end would be helpful. And Senator Lang, I totally understand what you're saying, that like if we're talking about two different groups of people, the only difference is that if we define what abuse, fraud, and waste is differently for whistleblowers than what the OIG is investigating, you could have scope that whistleblowers are reporting to the OIG that they don't have scope to investigate or do anything about. And so we want to make sure that what we're telling people, you're protected from reporting to these people, is what they have the ability to hear and do something about. And so I don't want to set up different legal parameters for folks where we are unintentionally then creating a trap where someone's like, I reported this thing, and they were like, yeah, but the OIG is not going to do anything about it because that's not how they define fraud.
And Mr. Chair,
Senator Lang.
Totally agree with that statement. Totally agree with that statement. The problem is that we have a whistleblower that reports that they think something is going wrong, and they make a report, and the OIG looks at it and says, no, that we can't do that, they still need that protection, right? So maybe the definition is different.
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My idea is that I think both my bill and your bill will be traveling to judiciary next, and that we could work on this together before it hits that committee. And then we could pass it as is today, knowing that it'll change in judiciary and then possibly come back here.
Senator McQuaid, your motion?
If I can get commitment that it will come back here, then I will withdraw my motion. Is that negotiation?
Senator Mathews.
Mr. Chair, I'm open to that. You're obviously the chair of the committee and have that authority to call it back to your committee.
Senator McQuaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Then I will withdraw my motion.
All right, and then with that, I will move to send this bill to re-refer, recommended to pass and re-refer to the Committee on Judiciary. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. The motion prevails. Senate 475 is recommended to pass and re-refer to Judiciary. Thank you, Senator Mathews. There being no further business, thank you all members. The committee meeting is adjourned.